Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Shyaonti Talwar, and today we are going to start a brand new unit in which we are going to look at T.S. Eliot's concept of tradition. So, let us first have a look at this great literateur's background. T.S. Eliot is one of the most prominent names in 20th century criticism, and in fact, he is the most towering and dominating literary figure of the 20th century. T.S. Eliot, if we had to describe him, we could have only one term for him, and that would be versatile genius. He was a poet, a playwright, a literary critic, a journalist, and an editor. And he was hugely responsible for reviving interest in the metaphysical poets of the 17th century. T.S. Eliot is also well known for coining several literary terms and phrases and concepts such as dissociation of sensibility, objective correlative, unified sensibility, and the like. His major works are The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism, which was published in the year 1933, The Idea of a Christian Society in 1939, and Notes Towards a Definition of Culture in the year 1948. T.S. Eliot is best remembered for his remarkably difficult and landmark poem, The Wasteland, which is a poem of 433 lines, and it is a widely prescribed poem in university and college syllabi. Now, let us understand what T.S. Eliot's concept of tradition is and why he thinks of tradition as being so significant. Now, if you remember in our previous discussion of Matthew Arnold's views on the functions of criticism, we find Arnold having a similar opinion about criticism that a good critic should be aware of not only his own literature but also of other foreign literatures. So, in other words, Arnold is also talking about the need to be aware of a long literary tradition, and we find this view reflected in Eliot's concept of tradition, which is in his work, in his critical essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, which could in many ways be seen as a declaration of Eliot's critical creed. So, according to Eliot, the best and the most individual part of a poet's work is that which shows the maximum influence of the writers of the past in his or her works. So, T.S. Eliot starts his argument by implying that the English tend to praise a particular work because it seems to be very novel and very individual, and it seems to be the writer's individual style. But apparently, it is not so. Whatever the writer writes, whatever text he comes up with, whatever work he comes up with, is actually an outcome of a long literary tradition. That is the argument that Eliot is making. And by tradition, Eliot says that we do not mean by tradition a blind adherence to previous generations. Tradition would mean a fair amount of awareness and exposure to the long line of literateurs and their works through centuries. So, tradition cannot be inherited just because you are born into a culture. You cannot claim to know everything about the culture. You cannot claim to know everything about the texts or the literature that is a part of that culture.